Amy Slate, I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Lori. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Well, we had to have you here, Amy, because you have a wonderful operation, wonderful dive operation, a hotel and a dive operation in the Florida Keys. And for those who are not familiar with the Florida Keys, because we have listeners from all over the world, the Florida Keys is probably the most threatened coral reef system in the world and the most used system in the world. And so, Amy, this is why it's so important to have you here, because people need to understand that even in a highly developed situation where you're in, you actually are doing a lot to move along the sustainability pathway. So that's why I wanted to have you here. Not only that, but because you're in the Women Divers Hall of Fame, and we had so much fun at Beneath the Sea watching you get honored. That was so much fun. And then we had our talk about all the things that you're doing. So I said, you have to be on the summit. So here we are.
Here we are. Well, thank you. And I, again, appreciate you including me, and I hope I can really add to the whole show.
There's no doubt you will. Now, let's just fill people in. When did you get to the Keys? When did you start a dive operation? How did this all happen?
Okay. I actually came to Key Largo in 1978, so 37 years ago, to start a business. My first trip to the Keys actually when I was about, oh gosh, 8 or 9 years old, and I went snorkeling, and I actually played with the dolphins, and I got out of the water, and I told my parents, I said, you know, this is where I want to be, where I want to live with these animals and the marine life that I love. And so my love affair with the ocean, really started very young and has continued.
So how did you end up down there? After college, you just said, I'm out of here?
Well, I was a teacher. I'm a Gator, University of Florida. And I was a teacher, and I was actually teaching in the Jacksonville area for 3 years. And at the same time, when you're young, you're doing a million things at once. I was going to graduate school, and I was also teaching scuba diving and at the YMCA, the local YMCA there, and taking students down to Key Largo to do their checkout dives. And I had grown up in Miami and really missed the warmer weather. And so one cold, icy morning, I told my principal, I'm like, I have to resign. I'm not coming back next year. So that was my big, decision-making point. And then I came to Key Largo and actually opened up a dive operation with my former husband. And then we went our separate ways in 1992. And in 1993, I created and opened Amoray, which I really did a lot of research and searching, diving in different locations really all over the world and going to different resorts to try to put together something that would be really nice and comfortable for the divers and good for the environment as well.
So you decided on the get-go that you really wanted to kind of ramp it up a notch, not be the typical dive operation back in the 90s. You wanted to be more on the forefront of this.
Exactly. And I started in 93, so with Amoray. But previously, like I said, I had started in 78. And when I first got into diving, it was a really different mindset. It was really a macho, all-men sport. The majority of people in diving were men, and absolutely the majority of people who own dive operations were men. And, people were really into the hunting and the spearfishing, and, there was no concern for the corals, or, people used to break sea urchins open and feed the hogfish. And, it was just a total different mindset than there is, thankfully, today. And very early on, I started teaching my divers about marine conservation and not touching the corals and not polluting our oceans. And all of those things were in my briefings when I first started at Amoray in 93. And so the Marine Sanctuary came along a few years ago and started a program called the Blue Star Program. And Amoray is actually the very first uh, operation that was designated Blue Star, and they really kind of took a lot of the things that we were already doing and incorporated it into what they were requiring anyone to do that became a Blue Star. So we did start very early on to try to educate, to protect our oceans.
You are a pioneer, my dear.
Well, I guess.
Yes, you are.
Background as well that I had, being a teacher, I think that also gave me a little bit different mindset, as far as the whole situation and industry was concerned.
So when you got your resort, Amoray, it was an existing resort?
No, they were actually buildings that people rented, like on an annual basis. They were like apartments, and so we have a lot of apartments because that's what they were originally on long-term rentals. So I saw the property and I said, this would be a great resort property, and it's beautiful, right on the bay, and we have gorgeous sunsets and everything. So I, tried to think of a name, and People magazine had done an article on me by the underwater weddings that actually I started doing back in the late 70s. And one of the Moray eels actually showed up at the wedding, and in the article they said, and that's Amoray, like love. And my real last name is my maiden name is Minichino, so I'm Italian. So the combination of the play on words with Amoray, that's why I chose Amoray for the name. And then a very dear friend of mine, Judy Hallis, she and her husband do all the mooring buoys, she came up with the logo for me of the Moray eel in the shape of a heart. And that was my opening present. And Stephen Frink came and took pictures for my brochure, and all my friends really, came and helped and pitched in to help me get everything off the ground.
Well, now that it's a certified Blue Star resort, I want to take us to the beginning. And how did you change these? How did you change the apartments? Like the whole overview of how you worked on the hotel, on the dive operation, etc. The staff. How did you start to walk through and upgrade it so that it's more sustainable, it's more eco-friendly, it's more in line with your connection to the ocean, wanting to have the least amount of impact? Where did you start? What did you do?
Well, the buildings were, a little older and things like that, so just anyone would normally do some renovations and things like that, which we did, and we put in tile floors and took out the carpeting, which the tile is much more sustainable, where you're not having to replace carpet all the time. We also started recycling, where we have recycling bins. On the rooms, we basically went through every room and just tried to make it as sustainable as possible, that we could. With the dive boat, I had a dive boat built, which is a Corinthian. It's a catamaran, and it also has, of course, a recycle bins and garbage bins, and we have the 4-stroke engines so that leads more. It's better for the environment, more available, and so we've tried in those ways to do what we could to help the environment as much as possible.
What about your staff? As you started to kind of up the ante, how did you train your staff? Or did you just naturally attract staff who were interested in doing what you're doing?
Well, I think some of both. I'm really careful. I kind of handpick every person that works here. I still do myself. And I really try to hire people who have the background with marine biology and who have, some knowledge of our environment that we're working in. And then also, prior to Blue Star, but also with Blue Star, again, they're educated as far as the policies of the marine sanctuary, and of course, not to touch the corals, not to throw anything in our oceans. Um, they're also trained about all the different sanctuaries, really, that is available in the world through the Marine Sanctuary Program. So they actually take about I don't know, I'd say about an hour course that goes through all of these things, and then they do a little test on it, and so that certifies them through Blue Star that they are familiar with their environment and with the sanctuary.
That's really interesting that you're actually putting your staff through a course. This is great. This is really great.
It isn't, excuse me, but it isn't only the boat staff, but the whole office staff too. You know, so everyone who has any dealings with the public is going to have some, you know, at least a basic knowledge of what the sanctuary teaches.
So I'm okay. So this is your all of your staff, not just your dive operation. Now your the people who are on the boats. Do they have more training on teaching the divers ecology, how the coral reef system works? Do they do any of that in their briefings? How do you do that?
Absolutely. No. Every day before the boat goes out, there's a whole briefing all about the marine sanctuary and about a marine ecology, and about what to touch, not to touch, what to not throw into our oceans. So we're very, very careful. It's probably about 10 minutes of so not that it's so long, but it's long enough to really get the point across. And also we have literature on the boats that again educate about our marine environment and what to do and not to do. So it's really important. And over the past 22 years that I've been at Amoray, I was figuring it out one day. It seems like we've touched over 60,000 people with that message. So that's a lot of people, really to help, change over, to thinking the way we all should be thinking, as far as protecting our marine environment, our whole environment,
Yeah. Do you talk to them about any of the critical ocean issues that we face, like climate change, ocean acidification, bleaching?
Yeah. Well, quite honestly, we do hit on bleaching, if the water's been too warm here. Quite honestly, we don't always have the time, because again, we have their attention for about 10 or 15 minutes to go over our Blue Star briefing and also our safety briefings and all that kind of thing. And yes, while we're out on the water, our boat staff are all scuba instructors or dive masters. So they've all been through a lot more training as far as different courses that they are able to teach about the marine environment. So and again, a lot of them are marine biologists and different, or they have degrees in environmental studies and different types of degrees like that all tend to help us to educate our divers. So when the diver's out on the reef and they see something, our staff is very able to answer their questions or to get into a discussion about it, type of thing. Now we also do actual classes with the Coral Restoration Foundation and with Reef with Fish ID. We actually have one going this coming weekend. So we have a reef class tomorrow, and we have a coral restoration class on Saturday. And this is the first year that we've combined them, and I think it's going to do really well, for people where they have just an introduction one day about reef and fish ID and the lionfish problem that we're having and the grouper moon, all of the things that reef is involved with. And then the next day they have a lecture about the coral restoration and how that whole process works and how they can become citizen scientists and help, to actually plant corals and get involved. So it's really been inspiring, to see these people get so excited about giving back and helping and keeping everything blue and green,
When you do, so for people who don't know, REEF, the Reef Environmental Education Foundation, does surveys, fish surveys of reefs all over the world, but particularly in the Caribbean, and they use volunteer divers who go on group trips and or do them at a resort, and they do them on their own. And dive operators like yourself can have a reef course at your dive operation, and that's what you're doing. So you have visitors coming down, divers coming down, and they sign up to take a reef ID course. Is that how it works?
Yes. So we advertise this out to our divers, and we say, okay, on whatever, tomorrow's the 8th, on Friday, May 8th, we're going to be having a reef ID class, and they'll actually go down to the reef office, which we're really lucky that the reef office is right here, and they'll have a fish ID class. And then they'll come back and they'll go on our boat, and somebody from Reef will actually go out with them as well and actually be on the boat to answer questions and to help them. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Reef has the largest database in the world for fish ID and knowing whether, and scientists from all over the world use that database for their research because there's no one else who's doing that. Also, the Marine Sanctuary hires Reef to go and do fish ID, like for instance on the different shipwrecks that we've had. So the Reef employee will go out and do a survey on the site prior to the ship being sunk, and then they'll do one every 6 months or a year or whatever the time frame happens to be, to show the Marine Sanctuary what's happening to that area and if it's becoming more prolific or not in certain species and that sort of thing.
So for artificial reef purposes, when they go out and survey before they sink the ship, and then afterwards they watch to see how the fish aggregations come in over that site.
Exactly.
That's. Do you have any involvement in that with your divers?
Not in the actual doing the actual survey for the government, because they want it very specific with very specific people. But we do a lot of fish ID, with other divers, and I personally love to do it, and so it's a lot of fun. I was on Reef's board for a number of years, and it's very dear to my heart. They really do a great service for all of us, and they do a lot around the world. With the lionfish, Lad is out teaching about the lionfish all over the Caribbean and helping to eradicate them in our Caribbean in the waters where they shouldn't be, and the Grouper Moon Project. I mean, if it wasn't for Reef, those groupers would still be getting killed when they're spawning,
Yeah.
And so it's
for those. We should back up, because there's people from other parts of the world who don't know the problem we have with Nassau Grouper in the Caribbean.
Okay.
Do you want to just cover that?
Well, sure. There's different spawning areas where the Nassau Grouper spawn every year. And what was happening is the fishermen were going out and actually netting and catching, thousands and thousands of these grouper. And so what was happening was the population was diminishing. So Reef actually went to the different governments, I know in Cayman and also in Honduras, and I'm trying to think where else, the Bahamas maybe, where they know that these grouper have their spawning spots, and actually convince the governments to make that illegal for the fishermen to do. So now the fishermen are not allowed to catch those large quantities of fish at the spawning times. And so what's happened is the grouper population is starting to rebuild again. And it's really better for everyone because they're catching more fish, throughout the year, but they're not depleting the population on that one period of time.
Right, and no grouper sandwich, guys. We keep telling people don't eat grouper.
Don't eat grouper. I haven't eaten a grouper, and I can't even tell you how many years. Probably 30 years. So.
Yeah, me too. It's like eating a puppy dog. Can't do it.
Yeah, little pet groupers that I love to play with.
Now, your work with Coral Restoration Foundation is really, really interesting as well. Can you tell us how you use what they're doing as a way to bring divers in, fill your boats? I mean, this is a whole program you run through your. It's a moneymaker.
It is, and with Reef as well. Yeah. What I'm actually on the board for Coral Restoration now. I only try to do a couple of boards at a time, so I resigned from Reef to do the Coral Restoration. They're both equally dear to my heart, but to try to work with this one. But we actually run programs with Coral Restoration, and we in the past we've had 2-day programs. This year, like I was saying, we're trying something new with a 1-day program of one of Reef and one of Coral Restoration. So we actually send out with these newsletters, to all of our divers and former customers, and we have a mailing list of about 20,000 now. And so we send this information out, and again, we invite them to come and become citizen scientists and help with this coral restoration. So they have a day of class where they're actually in the classroom and learning about how the process works. And then we take them out to the coral nursery, and they have a chance to see firsthand how these corals are all, growing. And then we take them out to the reef where we need to plant the corals, and we actually plant corals. So it's a real, you can actually see what you've done. It's a really satisfying feeling to, take all these little corals and go plant them, and then maybe come back in a few months and see how they've grown. So it's very exciting.
Do you have repeat guests who come back year after year to do this kind of thing?
They do. Oh, absolutely. And they also want to go back and see their corals.
Their babies.
Yeah. So you can adopt a coral too. Anyone can go to the restoration site and adopt a coral and put your name on it, and that's your coral for life. So.
I love this. This is great. Well, this is a very good model for people to look at, Amy, because you've been going through your organization and your operation and bringing it up through to be more and more sustainable. And I know there's people around you who've been watching you and going, well, maybe I should do it too. So you're having a lot of ripple effect by doing this. Other operators are watching you. But what you're also doing, which is really, really important, is that you're tapping into the community. So you are working with local NGOs, which is Coral Restoration Foundation and Reef, or both nonprofits. And you are actually providing them with volunteers, and you are creating a stream of income for yourself by doing this. And it works well for everybody.
It's really a symbiotic relation for everyone involved, and it really works, and it's really a win-win. And the only reason I can see why some other operations may not get as involved is it does take a lot of organization, and it does take a lot of planning. So you have to have a way to do all of that. And again, I've been in the business 37 years, and so if I weren't doing these other things, I'd be bored, Where a lot of the newer operations that are just getting involved, they're on the survival level where, it's if they can't see where they're going to make the money off of it immediately, they can't see it in their business plan to do it. But I think in the long run, it's good for everyone, and it's good for the customer, and it's definitely a win-win as far as I'm concerned. And I try, to do the most that I can, to talk to other operators and, discuss what I'm doing and to try to reach out and help, because it's good for all of us, if the more people that we can educate. At Amoray, we also work with the scientists, like with the coral spawning, and that's a really great event that we do every year as well. And we also do work with scientists, particularly with our coral spawning program that we have. So every year, a couple of days after the full moon, the corals spawn. So 2 to 3 days after the full moon is the acroporia, which are the branching corals. and 4 to 6 days are the boulder corals. So, but you have to go out really late. So we go out from, I don't know, say like 8 till like midnight or 1 in the morning, and we'll just go to a shallow spot, and we'll just, the divers will just go in and dive and keep diving basically, because it's like, 20, 30 feet of water. We have a few areas that are really diverse in the corals, and it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And we have a scientist, again from the Marine Sanctuary, who specializes in coral spawning, and she actually comes and does a lecture here with us for our coral spawning divers. And she shows this great video that's she has compiled over the years of all of her different coral spawning experiences. So the diver gets to see this, and the diver also gets to see what they're looking for, basically, because not only the corals spawn, but the sponges, and a lot of the fish have different behaviors. So it's really a big fish behavior type of thing as well. So then she'll go out with tents, and the divers will help her set up with the tents and everything over the corals, and actually catch the coral spawn, and then they'll take it back to a laboratory, and they actually cross the different coral spawns from different areas to make this hardier coral. Isn't that cool? And then they'll grow it and plant it. So it's amazing. So yeah, Rosenfield School here in Miami is real involved with it. And again, there's a group of PhDs that come down and work on this, and Lori, the lady from the sanctuary, is very involved as well. So again, our divers are getting to be citizen scientists and help the scientists and really understand, what's going on. The junior college here in Key West, they have come for the last 3 years, and we've been really fortunate, because it's a hit and miss kind of thing. You don't always hit on the right nights. But you do see some different behaviors at any time during that period. And so Alex Britsky is their instructor, and he brings them up every year and does the coral spawning with us, and really has had some great responses and results with his students. Just how much they've enjoyed it, and how it's influenced them in their educational paths and things like that. So.
Sure. Well, in terms of the divers that you deal with, do you find more and more they're asking for these kinds of experiences? They're not just interested in going and getting wet. They want to do more underwater?
I really think that the divers that we attract at Amoray are more of those types of people. They're more the types of people that are more interested in learning more about the marine environment and how to help it, and how to become our citizen scientists, and doing more different programs that are involved with that. So therefore, I keep trying to evolve, different things that will, whet their appetites and keep them coming back.
So let me just do a recap. In terms of your outreach, you have, let me get my list here. You work with NGOs, so you work with Reef and Coral Restoration Foundation. You work with scientists coming from various colleges and universities in South Florida. You work with the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary scientists. Okay, so what do you do locally? Just do you go to schools? Do you?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's the other thing that we do. We've probably taken every child in Monroe County out snorkeling or to learn about our marine environment. The Marine Sanctuary used to have a program where every child in a certain grade, would come out and have an education about the marine environment. Unfortunately, that program, with the defunding and everything, didn't continue, but the gal who was working with it now is transferred to Fish and Wildlife, and she actually has gotten donations to where she's been able to continue it in Florida Bay. So it's really great that, even though it's changed a little bit, I give them like a, rock bottom, you know what I mean, almost free price. And then they get donations from, actually the Ocean Reef Club has a foundation, and they give them the money to do this every year. So we're able to educate almost every child in Monroe County at a certain grade. They get to go out on the boat and get in the water with a marine biologist and look at different things and talk about what it is and what it does. So again, it really, really helps to make a world a better place, because you're educating these children who are hopefully going to take all of that with them and, pass that on, as far as how to protect our ocean.
Do you get together with the other dive operators and help to guide policy locally or through the marine sanctuaries? Because that marine sanctuary, there's so much diverse use, and I know there's fishing conflicts with diving and with conservation, and there's a lot going on down there. There's such a big population, and there's so many people who are doing different things. So do you do anything involving that?
Well, we have an organization called the Florida Keys Association of Dive Operators, and it's a lot of the dive operators throughout the Keys. Now, of course, you can't make everyone join if they don't want to or whatever, but we do have meetings probably quarterly, and so we actually, that's how I learned about Ken Niedermeyer and Coral Restoration Foundation, was through one of these meetings. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was like 10 years ago, but it was when he first started. We're like, we want to do this, this is amazing. So so it is a really good outreach, and then we do send information to every dive operator about all the different things that are going on. So there is that communication, but again, unfortunately, some of the dive operations, the newer ones, are on survival mode, and they don't feel they have the time or the means or whatever, to get involved in different things. So, we keep trying, and so we reach out, and those that do, are obviously always welcome, to learn, and those that cannot, well, hopefully eventually they will, But we keep that outreach going, like I said, they at least quarterly, they'll get a newsletter, and they'll have a meeting, and, hopefully there'll be something to, and not just about this subject, but, about whatever Coast Guard regulations are coming in, or all the different things that affect all of us, so that way we can, be united and have a united front, so to speak.
What do you think that dive operations have in terms of responsibility to do the kinds of things that you're doing and other people are doing like you are? You're being very, for me, because I have an agenda to get everybody doing this.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
Well, I do too, but it's, you can't twist someone's arm.
Yeah. So you don't tar and feather them if they don't get involved, but you keep at them, keep inviting them to come into the fold.
And the Marine Sanctuary, in order to be a Blue Star, you have to do certain things, and they don't make everyone a Blue Star because they're not following certain rules. So that's like kind of an incentive, because that is listed on their website, and there is some prestige that goes along with that. So that's one way that they're being very heavily encouraged to do those sorts of things. But to answer your question, I think the maximum minimum people should do is, when the boat goes out, to give them briefings about not touching the coral, not throwing things in the water, having a recycling bin on the boat. Those to me are the bare minimums. But as far as trying to get them to get involved in all these different programs, again, it takes some coordination and some planning and all of that. And so, I can empathize with, again, some of these newer operations, having been there at one point myself, knowing how hard it is just to do business without worrying about all these other things.
Right, right. Can you give us some of the opportunities that you have been able to bring into your business because you just started to do business differently?
Well, I mean, I think, for one thing, the Women's Hall of Diversity. I think, I think that what part of the reason they recognized me was because of all the things that I am doing, with environmental efforts, and to me, it's just a way of life. It's just the feedback that I'm constantly getting that makes me feel good about what I'm doing. It's that hierarchy of wanting to get to that next level as far as, the giving back part and the educating part, to where it makes you feel good about your existence. And so, yeah, so to me, those are the biggest intrinsic values of all the different programs that we do. And it's really so exciting to me when, I hear someone say, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. I want to come back and do this again. It really makes me feel good. That's the best. And it does help my business. It does help by bringing people back into my business. But again, other people have great businesses that don't do this. So, I don't think that's the only reason that we do it here at Amoray. I think we do it here because of my overall philosophy, the employees that I bring in that enjoy the same types of things that I'm talking about, that the feelings of accomplishment and of bringing people in and of educating people. And so when we keep running these programs, it keeps those people interested and motivated and, wanting to do more and more. And so for our operation, it works. And I think it's been a very good model for us.
You've been in operation over 20 years in one of the most competitive diving destinations in the world. And obviously you are doing something right because this is the testing ground. And you're doing incredible work. So I want to thank you for doing this and being a role model because I am trusting that you're going to inspire people who are watching this to go, I can do this too.
I hope so. And I invite any of them, if it's a person in a dive operation, to call me and I'm happy to share. I really would enjoy, sharing what we do and how we make it successful for us.
You are one of the most generous people I know. A huge heart. You've got such a huge heart, my dear Amy. And we're just so happy that you could join us today. And I know you're going to send us some resources, and we'll talk about that later, that we can post for people to access. And just the offer that you just made to our listeners and our participants about contacting you, that's huge. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and it's really been my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. See you next time.
And everybody stay tuned for more Blue Ocean Business Summit. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Take care.